you may have noticed, if you've been paying attention to the news, things have been going on in Bangladesh, and you'll probably be saying, well, hang on a minute, I'm not from Bangladesh. Why does it matter
I'm not
to
from
me?
Whitechapel.
Yeah, I'm not from Whitechapel or parts of London, that has a very large Bangladeshi community. But yes, there's something going on there that I think is very analogous to what's going on in Europe and perhaps even America as well. So there has been what I am dubbing an Islamic Revolution. And I think it's somewhat fair to say that. There are political reasons. She's not part of it. She's been deposed. But the official death figure so far of what's been going on in Bangladesh is at least 440 people, including children. And the lady on screen here is the former Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, and she stepped down and fled to India.
So sheikh is a unisex word.
Apparently so.
Oh.
But she escaped minutes before thousands of people stormed her residence and then subsequently ransacked it. She's been serving as the Prime Minister of Bangladesh since January of 2009. And she also served a term leading up to the 2000s, I think, from 96.
So is this the one who's Tulip Siddique's aunt?
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
I did try and look it up, but I just couldn't find out. But she's the longest serving Prime Minister in the history of Bangladesh, and her party is the Awami League. And she is the daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the founding leader of Bangladesh and its first president. And her family are known as the Bangabandhu family, which is a term of respect for her father's role in the country gaining independence. So she entered politics after her father and much of her family were assassinated in 1975, and then she became the leader of the Awami League in 1981, and then served as Prime Minister for the first time from 96 to 2001. So it's safe to say she's been a fixture of the country's politics, and her family have, since its independence, really.
Yes, it is. This is Tulip Siddique's aunt.
Okay.
And she's alleged to have disappeared her political opponents. And so when Tulip Siddique was ever asked about it, she always says, I'm not the MP for Bangladesh, even though she ships people over from Bangladesh to campaign
irony,
for her.
Yeah. So I think part of what has happened here are her beliefs. She wanted a secular state that did not oppress the religious minorities. And of course, Bangladesh is 91% Muslim and 8% Hindu, with a small minority of Buddhists and Christians. And she cracked down pretty hard on Islamic extremism and terrorism. At least that's what people are saying. I've not been following Bangladeshi politics closely, but that is what the media is reporting. And she tried to seek to prevent sectarianism, which is something that seems to be affecting a lot of the world at the minute. And how did all of this start? How did it come to be that she was deposed from her office? So in July, protests began against job reservations for the families of the 1971, and this is their words, war heroes, which set quotas that a certain portion of government jobs would go to the families involved in the 1971 independence movement. And it'd actually been halted in 2018 after protests. And then there was a petition from the 1971 families to the High Court, which then reinstated the quotas because, of course, they wanted the nice, cushy jobs, right? And then the Supreme Court ordered that 93% of all government jobs would be allocated on merit. 5% would go for these veterans. And then the remaining 2%, and I couldn't believe it when I read this, would be reserved for members of ethnic minorities, transgender, and disabled people.
Oh.
So even in Bangladesh.
Oh, they've got DEI.
But just for 2%. I mean,
that sounds kind of about right, is it not? What percentage of the population is that?
I don't know. I think it's probably, I suppose the Hindus are 8%, aren't they? But then it might just be a religious rather than ethnic thing. Who knows? But the protests began in Dhaka University, as protests often do, at universities, that is. And people were saying that it's unfair and that it should be replaced with a merit-based system, which I agree with, actually.
Meritocracy,
Yeah, fair enough. If you want a meritocracy, I respect that.
Yep.
And then the protests grew, and then people were killed in a back and forth because both police and protesters were using live ammo. So at the beginning, protests looked more like this, where...
That was like a music video.
It does, doesn't it? But
Michael Jackson's about to start moonwalk.
Yeah, all you need is him in the middle there. But it was just people marching around, showing their distaste for this policy.
Okay.
Sorry, getting a very dry mouth. But I think that there is also a vested interest because, of course, if they come from these families, they're probably going to share this secularization of Bangladesh that perhaps the Muslim majority don't want. And I think that perhaps is a bit misleading because I don't think they want it. And then things got a little bit more violent. Here is a pretty large protest. You can see fires and things getting a bit more out of hand, people marching all in one direction towards things. It's very difficult to know what's coming out because the information coming from Bangladesh isn't nearly as clear as it might be from a Western country. Yeah. And so I'm sort of having to read tea leaves a little bit. But at the minute, there's an interim government led by this guy, Mohammed Yunus. And he is an entrepreneur, banker, and economist and worked as a professor. So he actually won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006 for being a pioneer of microcredit and microfinancing, which is basically where you provide very small loans to individuals and businesses that might not otherwise be able to get them, which doesn't necessarily sound that bad, although he might well be profiting off of, the destitute people in the country. But offering them a service, I think, is better than nothing, right? Oh. And he's also got a United States Presidential Medal of Freedom and the United States Congressional Gold Medal.
From which president?
I don't know. I didn't look that up.
It will tell us a lot, I think.
I don't think it was Donald Trump. Okay. And he will remain until an election is held in the meantime.
But if they have another election.
That's true. There's a lot to be seen. So what is interesting, this is the political backdrop, but what's been going on the streets is very, very different. So there have been attacks on Hindu temples and homes in Bangladesh. So we can see here just the destruction. And I've seen lots and lots of videos like this of Muslims going out and just attacking Hindu minorities, largely, I think, have been the focus of their eye because, of course, there's a little bit of tension with India being on their border. And so Hindus, of course, being heretical religion to the Mohammedans, as you call them. And so they justify them as being a target.
There's tension wherever there are Mohammedans, let's be honest.
That is true. And what I'm seeking to show here is that the direction that the country is going is further into Islamism, it seems. Yes, exactly.
So this is what sparked off the riots in our London streets then? Okay.
So obviously there's an element of Islam cannot coexist with people of other belief systems or anything really, yeah.
Itself.
Certainly with civilization. And they were targeting things like Hindu temples here. So you see this is clearly a Hindu temple and they're going in and trying to smash it up, hitting it with sticks and doing all sorts of
destructive ideology, isn't it?
I tell you what I find really infuriating. I saw it in Pakistan where they dug up this many thousand-year-old Buddhist statue as a beautiful work of art, and then they started smashing it to bits because it was heretical. It's just like any belief system whereby you destroy things that have got obvious aesthetic beauty. I'm not a Buddhist. I don't have any religious reason. I can just recognize the virtues in the creation of the thing, and it shouldn't be destroyed. It completely numbs their mind. So things got even more violent here. So this is a tower block which 24 people burnt alive in Bangladesh. This is the extent to which they're willing to go to be an absolute majority, right? And have no minority in their country. And it's difficult to tell how widespread this is because a lot of the footage is lacking the context you need to be able to make these sorts of judgments. However,
this is what happens when Islam becomes the predominant faith.
Yes, here is an attack on a village here. This is a largely Hindu village in Bangladesh, and they were setting fires and attacking Hindus in their homes. You can see out here, look, they've even got bars in their windows, people setting fires and waiting for people to come out, basically, to do them harm. Yeah. And this is, this is what happens when you have a multicultural society, isn't it? Particularly with Islam, is that there is sectarian violence, and normally the people who are in the minority are not the beneficiaries of this. And this is, part of the concern in a lot of Western countries as well, that if more and more Muslims carry on coming in and the native population has a sub-replacement birth rate, eventually people are going to become minorities in their own countries. And then this sort of thing will happen to you.
Did you note Robert Jenrick's speech this week?
I did, yeah. Saying to ban Allahu Akbar, yeah.
Well, he said we've got to cut down on sectarianism. He kept saying sectarianism. I agree with him. We need less of it.
Yeah,
but he wouldn't identify the problem of the cause of the sectarianism, which is the Mohammedans.
Mm-hmm.
He would only go so far.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to me that there are lots of other ethnic minorities and religious minorities in Britain, and it's quite often the Muslims that are the ones that are turning out and up for a scrap, basically.
Yeah.
It says a lot about their character, doesn't it? So this is blurred, obviously, for the sake of your innocence, really. But we do have the uncensored version if you're silly enough to want to look for it in the reading list, but I've insisted on having it blurred. This is hanging the bodies of people they've killed by the ankles from a bridge to display to the rest of the community what happens if you oppose Islam.
What brutes.
I know. This is the kind of thing that will be awaiting any country that gets a critical mass of Islam, because this is a running trend throughout all countries that have a sizable enough population of Muslims, that as soon as the opportunity arises, they will take their anger and frustration and their hatred of people from other groups out on them as soon as they're able to.
But this is what I don't understand, Josh. We can see this evidence for ourselves all around the world, wherever Islam becomes the predominant faith. And we know it was founded this way. It was founded by a warmonger who would kill people as they reverted. They're
also encouraged to emulate the life of Muhammad. Right. So presumably they're going to then marry a 9-year-old.
Marry a 6-year-old.
Well,
consummated at 9.
Yeah, they're getting it round the wrong way. But it's either way, it's disgusting.
Evil.
Yeah, it is evil. And also the fact that Muhammad went around spreading his message by killing people.
Yeah.
Well, it couldn't be clearer. To follow the message of Jesus is not to do that, is it?
Exactly, it's to do the opposite. So I don't understand why the liberals are so in favour of this.
Nor do I. It's sort of turning a blind eye. It's also this idea of we've got to be so anti-racist as to ignore people who are an active danger to the people around them.
But this is not a race. But if it was a race, I would be racist against this race. This is not a good thing. This is objectively evil.
It is, yeah. Well, if your belief system leads you to harm other people because they don't have your belief system, you can't exist in a civilization.
No.
It's impossible.
This is why no predominantly Islamic country is civilized in the way we would recognize it.
Yeah, well, this is why the Middle East is always in turmoil. There's always a crisis in the Middle East because it's the Middle East and it's Islamic. It's ridiculous. You also see, these countries in the Middle East that used to be running a more secular line, like Syria and countries Lebanon,
Iran.
Yeah. And when that topples and it becomes an Islamic state, all of a sudden things go wrong.
So does it look like Bangladesh is going to become an Islamic state?
It does seem like that's almost certain to happen, yes. So there's more stuff here, though. This has been unconfirmed. There are at least they've at least bound Hindu women to these pillars with ropes.
What?
However, there are reports that they're being sold into slavery.
Oh my gosh.
Which I've not been able to confirm. But of course, Islam does approve of slavery. It's allowed in the Quran.
To anyone that's not a Mohammedan. Because they're seen as lesser people.
Exactly, yeah.
You know
I mean, you only need to look at Libya, for example, a Muslim country. Open slave markets in Libya, of trading of sub-Saharan Africans. You don't hear that talked about very often by the people who care about slavery reparations and things like that. But it's got to the point where Hindu volunteers have to stand guard of places where they live to make sure none of the robberies, rapes, murders are taking place in their local area. So here we can see them sort of hanging around, waiting about, standing guard with weapons, because there could be a Muslim mob waiting to attack them.
Yeah. As a Christian man, I stand with the Hindus of Bangladesh.
So Al Jazeera has also reported on this, saying students, other Muslims protect temples, churches amid Bangladesh unrest. I don't know about this. Maybe some people are helping protect temples and churches. I imagine these are Hindu temples and Christian churches because that would be who the Muslims would go for, right? So perhaps there are people that are helping. I don't know. I've not been able to get much evidence.
You know what we should do? We should send out the Stand Up to Racism lot with their placards. They can go and stand up some real racism and go.
That's true, yeah. They're persecuting people who are an ethnic minority in Britain. And finally, even the BBC is talking about this. There is no law and order, and Hindus are being targeted again. So it is getting some traction in the mainstream press, which I found interesting because it's basically admitting that the Muslim majority is going around and terrorizing people. Of course, this isn't going to be front page news for multiple different reasons, but it's certainly a good cautionary tale about the dangers of Islam and growing populations of Islam in Europe and North America.
90% Mohammedan. There's no way that that's not going to topple. There's no way it's not going to become an Islamic state now.
Yeah, even if it's put to a democratic vote, it's still going to become an Islamic state, isn't it?
So the last prime minister allegedly disappeared her opponents, but she was seen as a bit of a tyrant, but it seems she was a tyrant for political reasons because the other tyrants were even worse. And it looks like the other tyrant's going to take over now. I
could say something quite controversial here. Similar to Assad, maybe.
Okay. You could say that, but you didn't.
No, I didn't. He did rule secularly and he did oppose Islamic extremism, although in my opinion, a lot of the people in that neck of the woods are bad people no matter which faction they belong to, right? I don't really have to pick a side, and nor do I want to. So I will clarify with that. But the gist of my point here is be concerned about Islam. I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're getting up to, you can follow our series Lads Hour on the website, where we normally have a lot of fun, but sometimes we talk about serious topics as well. And if you want to see all the other work we're putting out, you can follow us on Twitter and you won't miss a thing. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.